I think we might as well get started. Welcome everyone to Shahrokh Monjazeb's third presentation out of the series of four regarding tablets Baha'u'lláh wrote to two Ottoman prime ministers. And he's already covered the Surah Rais, and today he will be covering the Lohi Rais, and in 2 weeks' time, the fourth presentation will finish the Lohi Rais and we'll cover the Lohi Fuad. So, without further ado, I now turn everything over to Shahrokh, and we're looking forward to hearing your presentation today, Shahrokh. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Stockman. Friends, good to be here with you in the third installment of this course on the three tablets of Baha'u'lláh, the two Turkish prime ministers, or addressed to Turkish prime ministers, even though these tablets were also, two of them were addressed to two other individuals primarily. But I've already spoken about the first recipient. But again, the theme, particularly of this, the second tablet here, is primarily addressed and a summon to Ali Pasha. So let's begin. So Lohi Rais, tablet of the chief, is the second tablet in which Baha'u'llah directly summons the Turkish Prime Minister Muhammad Amin Ali Pasha. It is numbered among Baha'u'llah's special proclamatory letters addressing the major monarchs and rulers of temporal power in the 19th century world. These tablets are generally referred to in Baha'u'llah's writings as Al-Wahi Muluk va Ru'asai Arz, which translates to tablets of the kings and rulers of the earth. This significant tablet, this Lohi Rais, streamed from the pen of Baha'u'llah within few weeks of his arrival in the Ottoman penal colony of Akka. If you recall, Surah Rais was revealed in the small town of Kashane on the way to Akka. Essentially, they were still in the Turkish, actually mainland at the time. It was on the way to the port of Gallipoli, where Baha'u'llah revealed Surah Rais, which only the first 8 paragraphs of it is addressed to Ali Pasha. The remaining paragraphs are addressed to Haji Mirza Ismail Kashani. But this tablet here is completely and totally addressed to Ali Pasha. The conditions of Baha'u'llah and his family's imprisonment during this final phase of his exile was so severe and torturous that he began referring to it in his writings as the Sijn Azam, or the most great prison. In his tablets, Baha'u'llah, and his writings, Baha'u'llah has referred to the places of his exile and also the imprisonment that he was subjected to, starting with his imprisonment in the dungeon of Siyah Chal. He refers to it as Sijn Akbar, the great prison. And in one of his tablets, he says, although the severity of the conditions of the Siyah Chal was beyond compare to any, but yet because of the prolonged period of suffering that Baha'u'llah and his family underwent when he was exiled to Akka, he chose to address that as the most great prison. The duration of it obviously was years. You know, Baha'u'llah was in the Siyah Chal only 4 months. We're in Akka for the first 2 years. He was confined to a solitary confinement. He was incarcerated in the army barracks, and then later on within the walls of the city of Akka, several homes. And it only took almost 10 years before Baha'u'llah transferred his residence out in the suburbs of Akka, to first the house in Mazra'eh and then in Bahji. So, but this period, particularly this initial period, of Baha'u'llah's arrival in the penal colony of Akka is addressed by him as, and referred by him and entitled by him as the Sijn Azam, or the most great prison. Now, of the significance of this tablet, Shoghi Effendi in God Passes By writes, to Ali Pasha, the Grand Vizier of the Sultan of Turkey, he addressed shortly after his arrival in Akka a second tablet in which he reprimands him for his cruelty that hath made hell to blaze and the spirit to lament. Recounts his acts of oppression, condemns him as one of those who from time immemorial have denounced the prophets and stirs of mischief, and prophesizes his downfall, expatiates on his own sufferings, and we will see that in detail, and those of his fellow exiles, extols their fortitude and detachment, predicts that God's wrathful anger will seize him and his government, that sedition will be stirred up in their midst, and that their dominions will be disrupted. And affirms, the Guardian continues, referring to Lohe Rais, it affirms that were he to awake, he would abandon all his possessions and would, quote, choose to abide in one of the dilapidated rooms of this most great prison. The Guardian continues by stating that in the Lohe Fuad, which we will be studying next week or next session, in the course of his reference to the premature death of the Sultan's foreign minister, Fuad Pasha, he thus confirms his above-mentioned prediction, which was, soon will we dismiss the one, namely Ali Pasha, who was like unto him, and will lay hold on their chief, Sultan Abdul Aziz, who ruleth the land, and I verily am the Almighty, the All-Compelling. You can find this reference in pages 208 and 209 of God Passes By. I'm not going to get into the life of Ali Pasha, just as a review again. We spoke about him at length last time when we were talking about the Surah Rais, but he was one of the prominent 19th century Grand Viziers during the Tanzimat period of the Ottoman Turkey. And again, some of the references here. So he served two sultans, one Abdul Majid, and then his brother Abdul Aziz as well. And he was addressed by Baha'u'llah, as we said, twice directly and twice indirectly and collectively with the rest of the ministers in Surah Muluk, and also in the Lohe Abdul Aziz Wakala, which is the text of which we don't have, and that was in Istanbul. It was revealed by Baha'u'llah in Istanbul, just as he was being exiled to the city of Edirne. And again, we've covered these. Now, looking at the external features of the tablet, revealed entirely in Persian with brief Arabic passages interspersed throughout the tablet. It's very interesting that out of all the letters that Baha'u'llah wrote to the kings and rulers, there's only two tablets that he's revealed in Persian, and partly in Persian. One, of course, is Lohe Sultan, the tablet to the Shah of Iran, where it's about 50-50, the usage of Persian versus Arabic. And also in this tablet, it's very interesting in the first summon in Surah Rais, it's obviously all Arabic, but this one, he's revealing in his mother tongue, in the language of his birth, being a Persian. And I think there's a certain wisdom to it. Persian adds, Arabic is a language of eloquence. Persian adds a degree of tenderness and compassion. Not that one cannot be compassionate in Arabic, but generally Arabic is a very eloquent language. It's very direct, very precise. In Persian, there are elements. It's more mystical. It's more phonic, and romantic a language. It also, it's phonically, it's more pleasing to the ear generally. And this tablet, with the exception of a few small Arabic passages, which I will point out throughout, about, I would say, not more than 90% of the tablet is in Farsi, in Persian. Excuse me. The authorized Baha'i English translation is 11 and a half pages long, divided into 29 paragraphs. You can find the tablet pages 161 to 173 of the Summons of the Lord of Hosts. It's worth noting that only about 10% of this tablet was translated into English by Shoghi Effendi. Some of the other letters to the kings, particularly in Promised Days Come, Shoghi Effendi quotes a large sections of those tablets. With this particular tablet, he does quote and translates several passages, but they only constitute about 10% of it. So the other 90% has been translated by the Baha'i World Center and was first published in an authorized Baha'i translation in the book Summons of the Lord of Hosts. Where you find these translations of Shoghi Effendi are mostly, as I said, in Promised Days Come and few lines in God Passes By. That's essentially where the Guardian has translated excerpts from the Loh Rais and Surah Rais as well. Now, according to the text of the tablet in paragraph 5, it was revealed shortly after Baha'u'llah's arrival in Akka. From the tone of the tablet, I believe it was likely composed sometime within 30 to 60 days. So weeks, not months, after the landing of the exiles in the penal colony, which puts the revelation date sometime in September, October of 1868. Baha'u'llah does refer to it that soon after our arrival, so soon after I would, and you want to also think that he gave about a month or so to evaluate his situation, that, and because in a way what this tablet was, from the style and the content of it, which is different from the Surah Rais, one could say that it was intended to be dispatched to Ali Pasha as a formal grievance. Surah Rais was really not, the previous tablet was really not meant to be dispatched to Ali Pasha, even though the first, 8 paragraphs of it is addressed to him. But as I said, the tablet is 41 paragraphs. It's much longer in length, and it was addressed to Anis, Haj Mirza Muhammad Ismail Kashani, so and deals with other issues beyond the summoning of Ali Pasha, like the concept of the soul and various other themes. Whereas in this tablet, the focus of the Loh Rais is primarily on the condition of Baha'u'llah's exile, what happened, and also his reprimand of the Turkish Prime Minister Ali Pasha and his admonishment to him. And so this, I believe, this tablet was written with the intent to be dispatched to Ali Pasha. However, we do not have any record that shows, or at least none has as yet come to light, that shows it did indeed was received by the prime minister. But in all likelihood, it was sent out to Ali Pasha. Now, whether, I mean, obviously, Baha'u'lláh was a prisoner, and he was sending a response to his jailer, his primary jailer, which was the Ottoman Sublime Porte, the Sultan and his government. So, you know, I mean, they would have probably received it, but they probably read parts of it and just basically discarded it. Anyways, that's just from looking at the date of it and the circumstances of it, and whether it was received or not. Now, the tablet begins with an invocation, and as I said, is in Farsi, so I will read you the first couple of lines of it. It reads, هو المالك بالاستحقاق قلم اعلا میفرماید ای نفسی که خود را اعلی الناس دیده و غلام الهی را که چشم ملأ اعلا به او روشن و منیر است ادنی العباد شمرده ای. غلام توقعی از تو و امثال تو نداشته و نخواهد داشت، چه که لازال هر یک از مظاهر رحمانیه و مطالع عز سبحانیه که از عالم باقی به عرصه فانی برای احیای اموات قدم گذارده اند و تجلی فرموده اند، امثال تو آن نفوس مقدسه را که اصلاح اهل عالم منوط و مربوط به آن هیاکل احدیه بوده از اهل فساد دانسته اند و مقصر شمرده اند. So I have highlighted in yellow the excerpt that I just read. So the invocation reads, he is in his own right and supreme ruler. He is in his own right the supreme ruler. The pen of the Most High proclaimeth, O thou who hast imagined thyself to be the most exalted of men, and who hast regarded as the lowliest of all creatures this divine youth, through whom the eyes of the concourse on high have been illumined and made radiant. This youth hath sought nothing from thee, or from such as are like unto thee, inasmuch as from time immemorial, whenever the manifestations of the All-Merciful and the exponents of his unfading glory have stepped out of the realm of eternity into this mortal world and revealed themselves to revive the dead, men such as thee have considered these sanctified souls and temples of divine oneness, upon whom must needs depend the rehabilitation of the peoples of the earth, to be stirrers of mischief and worthy of blame. These men verily have all returned unto dust. Thou too shalt ere long take abode therein and find thyself in grievous loss. This last section of this paragraph, these men verily have all returned unto dust, is actually in Arabic, but the rest of the paragraph is in Farsi. In the second paragraph, Baha'u'lláh protests that women, and particularly children among the exiles, were treated with the same severity of conditions as the adults, which is contrary to all forms of religious and ethical standards. He writes, even if this life giver and world reformer be in thine estimation guilty of sedition and strife, what crime could have been committed by a group of women, children, and suckling mothers that they should be thus afflicted with the scourge of thine anger and wrath? No faith or religion hath ever held children responsible. The pen of divine command has exempted them, yet the fire of thy tyranny and oppression encompasseth all. If thou bearest allegiance to any faith or religion, then thou shouldst know that, according to all the heavenly books and all the divinely inspired and weighty scriptures, children are not to be held accountable. Aside from this, not even those who disbelieve in God have perpetrated such unseemly acts, since from everything an effect becometh manifest, a fact that none can deny save those who are bereft of reason and understanding. It is certain that the sighs of these children and the cries of these wronged ones will have their due consequence. And another warning to him for the act of subjecting the children to the same conditions as adults, which is very cruel to begin with. In paragraph 3, actually in paragraphs 3 to 6, Baha'u'lláh recounts the sufferings which the exiles faced since the day of their arrival on August 31st, 1868. They arrived in paragraph 5, he refers to 4 of the exiles who were separated from the rest and were shipped with Mirza Yahya and his family to Cyprus. Now, there is a reference to that Baha'u'lláh makes in subsequent paragraphs about them being transferred from ship to ship 3 times. And I'll come back to that, basically, where and how that took place. Now, in paragraph 5, Baha'u'lláh refers to the 4 individuals, and these 4 individuals were essentially Al-Hussein Isfahani, known as Mishkin Ghalam, the great calligrapher, and one of the apostles of Baha'u'lláh. Second was Mirza Sheikh Ali Sayyah, who was a prominent Babi and a devout follower of Baha'u'lláh. And then Agha Abdul Ghaffar Isfahani and Agha Muhammad Baqir Qahwachi. You can get more information about their plight in Baha'i history books like Baha'u'lláh, King of Glory. There's a wonderful book written by Bahiya Nakhjavani, the daughter of the late Ali Nakhjavani, who is a great writer in her own right, which is entitled "Four on an Island," and it's a book much beyond the historical events. It's a wonderful book written beautifully. So I don't think it's still in print, but if you can get your hands on it, it gives a wonderful image of the sacrifices of these individuals and compares their efforts to the efforts of the many pioneers of the faith. As far as to just give you a little bit of a rundown of what happened, the so-called wisdom of this by the Ottomans, excuse me. Obviously, the Ottomans were very much aware of the antagonism between the Nuri brothers, okay, namely Baha'u'lláh and Mirza Yahya. I mean, obviously, the antagonism was initiated by Mirza Yahya, who wanted to destroy Baha'u'lláh and claim himself as the leader of the Babi community. But we won't get into that. But so in order to keep both parties on their toes, if you will, and create kind of spies within their ranks, they decided to send select four from Baha'u'llah's retinue to go with Mirza Yahya to Cyprus, and the other and took four of the chief followers of Mirza Yahya to be included with the exiles in Akka. We will come back to who the other four Azalis were. One of them was Sayyid Muhammad Isfahani, who was really the Antichrist of the Baha'i revelation, who was the great instigator of, as the Guardian puts it, of Mirza Yahya and his chief lieutenant. Now, Mishkin Ghalam, later, about 18 years later, after the island came under British rule, managed to request transfer and went and rejoined the exiles in 1886. So it took 18 years, I'm sure, torturous years for him, that he lived in Famagusta in Cyprus with Azal and his family, and basically, in the same location of exile that they were. I mean, obviously they were not in the same house or anything like that, but he was confined to the island of Cyprus. Now, Mirza Sheikh Ali Sayyah and Agha Muhammad Baqir Qahwachi, they both died in exile in Cyprus within 3-4 years of their arrival. However, the fourth individual, Agha Abdul Ghaffar, he was a younger man and he was very determined, and he decided that he was not going to stay. And so within 2 years, he escaped Cyprus and rejoined the exiles in Akka. Now, the same Agha Abdul Ghaffar, he was the one that when the ship had essentially anchored in the Bay of Akka, and the exiles were being transferred by paddle boats to shore, since he was one of the ones who had been selected to remain and be exiled, because the ship then left the Sea of Akka and then went to Cyprus. And he was amongst the four. But what he did, which Baha'u'llah refers to it as well, he threw himself into the water, basically as a protest, to drown himself, and he was actually rescued and resuscitated. He almost died, but he was resuscitated and taken to Cyprus. Now, at the time of his attempt suicide, where he jumped off the ship, people didn't know what happened to him, and Baha'u'llah actually makes mention in the tablet that no one knows what happened to him. But fortunately, he was rescued and resuscitated and was taken to Cyprus. So we'll come back to this theme again. Baha'u'llah continues, says, "Ye have plundered and unjustly despoiled a group of people who have never rebelled in your dominions nor disobeyed your government, but rather kept to themselves and engaged day and night in the remembrance of God. Later, when the order was issued to banish this youth, all were filled with dismay. The officials in charge of my expulsion declared, however, these others have not been charged with any offense and have not been expelled by the government. Should they desire to accompany you, no one will oppose them. These hapless souls therefore paid their own expenses." I referred to it last time, that basically the government said there's not going to be any free rides. You want to go into exile with your leader, you have to pay for the transit. And they willingly and affectionately paid for their tickets to go into exile, which basically shocked many observers at the time. So these hapless souls, Baha'u'lláh says, therefore paid their own expenses, forsook all their possessions, and contenting themselves with our presence and placing their whole trust in God, journeyed once again with him until the fortress of Akka became the prison of Baha. Baha'u'lláh continues, he says, upon our arrival, we were surrounded by guards and confined together, men and women, young and old alike, in the army barracks. The first night, all were deprived of either food or drink, for the sentries were guarding the gates of the barracks and permitted no one to leave. No one gave a thought to the plight of these wronged ones. They even begged for water and were refused. Now, I want you to imagine upon the arrival of Baha'u'lláh, this is in the heat of the summer. And for those of you who have gone on pilgrimage, normally pilgrimage is in the Holy Land in these days, ends, I believe, in the month of June and resumes again in September, October, I believe, just because of the severity of the heat and the weather is really hot. So Baha'u'lláh arrived and his retinue arrives August 31st. So it is absolutely scorching. And to add insult to the injury, the paddle boats, the way Akka is, it does not have a kind of a proper landing, and that's one of the reasons, because it was a fortress. So and it's from its sea gate, essentially you can only get by like paddle boats in, and then you got to jump into the water and wade yourself to shore. So you can imagine, I mean, this is a group of not only men, but are women and children. So many of the women had to be, basically, they had to piggyback on top of some of the men. The men had to carry the women and wade to shore because of the fact that, many of them, it would have been up to their waist or something. So again, this added further to the humiliation that, and Baha'u'lláh talks about, we're going to get to this, where he says that they had to change ships 3 times. So the Austrian Lloyd steamer that left the port of Gallipoli essentially took them to Alexandria, Egypt. From there, they had to board another ship, another Austrian Lloyd steamer, that basically took them from Alexandria to Port Said, and then from there to basically to Haifa. Okay. Now, in Haifa, they had to change ship again. So this is the 3rd time, to a sailboat that would then take them from Haifa to Akka, and then from there, just offloading them off with paddle boats to the actual landing. So very, very difficult situation. Very, very difficult. Now you have this large, about 80 people, this group that is landing, and some old, some young, some women, some men. I mean, it is, and the air is putrid. It's extremely hot. just conditions are very, very severe here. And then Baha'u'lláh says, time hath passed and we all remain confined in these barracks, notwithstanding that during the 5 years we dwelt in Adrianople, all its inhabitants, whether learned or ignorant, rich or poor, bore witness to the purity and sanctity of these servants. At the time this youth was departing from Edirne, one of the loved ones of God attempted to take his own life. So unbearable to him was the sight of this wronged one in the hands of his oppressors. This is again another reference to Haji Ja'far Yazdi, Haji Ja'far Tabrizi, who cut his own throat. Baha'u'lláh makes mention of this in Surah Reis, but he also reiterates it here in Loh Reis. Baha'u'lláh continues, during the journey we were thrice compelled to change ships. Now again, just imagine also when you're changing ship, you're not just going individuals from one ship. You got to carry all your belongings, okay, with you, and from one ship to another. Okay, it's you can imagine. I can't even imagine. If you have family and when you travel with them and you've got all these luggage and everything else, I mean, I'm just not going to lessen the significance here, but you can imagine that it's very difficult. I've traveled, I have 3 kids, and sometimes when you travel, I mean, you got all these luggage, you have to deal with all of that. Now just imagine 80 plus people, and it's just under very difficult situations, and not in a way that we have the convenience of transfers from one vessel to another that we have in modern times. Again, this was not a pleasure trip. Okay, they were being exiled, and the government made sure that these people suffered during this process. So Baha'u'lláh says, and it is evident how much the children suffered as a result of these transfers. Upon disembarking, 4 of the believers were separated and prevented from accompanying us. As this youth was leaving, one of the 4, named Abdul Ghaffar, cast himself into the sea, and no one knows what befell him thereafter. All this is but a drop in the ocean of the wrongs that have been inflicted upon us, and still ye are not satisfied. The officials enforce every day a new decree, and no end is in sight to their tyranny. Night and day they conceive new schemes. They have assigned each prisoner from the government storehouse a daily allowance of 3 loaves of bread for the 3 meals. That's it. Okay, 3 small loaves of bread that no one can eat. These breads were not edible. I mean, they were so bad. Okay. From the foundation of the world until the present day, a cruelty such as this hath neither been seen nor heard of. In paragraphs 7 and 8, Baha'u'lláh castigates Ali Pasha for his tyranny against the innocent Baha'i exiles and vows that God's wrath will soon overtake him and his Ottoman colleagues. He writes, by the righteousness of him who hath caused Baha to speak forth before all that are in heaven and all that are on earth. Ye have neither rank nor mention among them that have offered up their souls, their bodies and their substances for the love of God, the all-powerful, the all-compelling, the Almighty. A handful of clay is greater in the sight of God than all your dominion and your sovereignty, and all your might and your fortune. Should it be his wish, he would scatter you in the dust. Soon will he seize you in his wrathful anger, and sedition will be stirred up in your midst, and your dominions will be disrupted. Then will you bewail and lament and will find none to help or succor you. Just this reference about soon will he seize you in his wrathful anger. That happened. Sedition will stir up in your midst. It's a very long story of what happened, when Sultan Abdul Aziz was deposed, and then he committed suicide. Some have said that he was assassinated, but there's a good chance that he committed suicide. And then his son, who came to power, Murad, was a very difficult transition. He was an addict, some say, and there was he only lasted on the throne for a few months, and then Abdul Hamid II came to power. But there was a tremendous amount of sedition and commotion and palace intrigue, and it's quite a drama. And again, Baha'u'lláh foreshadows this here. It's very interesting. And your dominions will be disrupted. And the disruptions in the second half of the 19th century, from Egypt to various provinces, the European provinces, and the Turco-Russian War of 1877, after the downfall of Abdul Aziz and his death, there was a terrible war that tremendous number of the Ottomans lost their lives, thousands, and it was a bloodbath. Again, all of these things, Baha'u'lláh says that this is as part of the divine retribution for what the hands of these tyrants have wrought. And then he says, then will ye bewail and lament, and will find none to help or succor you. In making mention of these matters, Baha'u'lláh continues, it is not our purpose to rouse you from your slumber, since the fury of God's wrath has so encompassed you that ye shall never take heed. I found this statement very, very poignant and just very, very strange, that he says, despite of what I'm saying to you, you're not going to, because you're set in your way, and God has actually, made you be set in your way. I mean, because of his anger, that you are not going to avail yourself of this condition, that your condition will persist, despite of what I'm even telling you. I found that to be quite a, incredible statement here. So God's wrath has so encompassed you that ye shall never take heed, nor is it our intention to recount the iniquities visited upon these pure and blessed souls, for they have been so intoxicated with the wine of the All-Merciful, and are so carried away with the inebriating effect of the living waters of his loving providence, that even were they to suffer all the cruelties of the world for his sake, they would remain content and yield thanks unto him. These souls have never held, nor shall they ever hold, any grievance. Nay, their blood continually implores and beseeches the Lord of the worlds that it might be spilt upon the dust in his path, and their heads yearn to be borne aloft on spears for the sake of the beloved of hearts and souls. A great demonstration of radiant acquiescence that Baha'u'lláh has invited his followers, he himself being the primary person who practiced this radiant acquiescence from basically the Baghdad period all the way through his successive exiles. In paragraph 9, originally this paragraph was translated into English in its entirety by Shoghi Effendi, and it's published in Promised Days Come. In this paragraph, Baha'u'lláh reminds Ali Pasha of several natural calamities, such as fires and plagues, which have almost destroyed the Ottoman capital. It's worth noting that the Hoka Pasha and Kamkapi fires of 1865, there were several fires in 1865, but particularly these two regions of the capital, each destroyed close to 3,000 buildings. In fact, according to the Ottoman historian Philip Manzel, the 1865 fire was the worst in the history of Istanbul. It, quote, destroyed much of the area between the Sea of Marmara, the Golden Horn, and the mosques of Bayezid and Hagia Sophia. So the city was almost demolished by these fires, which was just a scourge upon the population. So Baha'u'lláh reminds him of these. He says, several times calamities has overtaken you, and yet ye failed utterly to take heed. One of them was the conflagration which devoured most of the city. I believe this is where he is, and again, the House of Justice in their footnote, they're referring to possibly the Hoka Pasha, but there's also the other fires in that area. I mean, altogether, they were just absolutely devastating. And Baha'u'lláh says most of the city was devoured with the flames of justice. So again, he associates these fires and the plague as divine retribution upon the city and its people and the government for what they have done, the injustices that they have committed against the Baha'is. And Baha'u'lláh says, and concerning which many poems were written, stating that no such fire had ever been witnessed. And yet ye waxed more heedless. Plague likewise broke out, and ye still failed to give heed. Be expectant, however, for the wrath of God is ready to overtake you. Ere long will ye behold that which hath been sent down from the pen of my command. In paragraph 10, Baha'u'lláh reminds Ali Pasha that both his glory and Baha'u'llah's abasement will not endure. He writes, have ye fondly imagined your glory to be imperishable and your dominion to be everlasting? Nay, by him who is the all-merciful, neither will your glory last, nor will mine abasement endure. Such abasement, in the estimation of a true man, is the pride of every glory. In paragraph 11, Baha'u'lláh begins to recount in detail a highly influential memory from his childhood. He narrates the event of a puppet show which took place during a nuptial celebration of his older half-brother. At the time, Baha'u'lláh was still a child of no more than 10 years of age. The narrative of the puppet show continues through paragraphs 12 to 16. Baha'u'lláh gives a very detailed account. Many of you have read this, heard about this. You should really revisit it. I'm going to skip over it here. But it is, I'd like you to reflect on it and perhaps offer some commentaries in the forum, in the course forum regarding this puppet show. So I'm going to just skip over these. It's quite extensive. I want to just get to paragraph 16. Now, the analysis, the conclusion of this puppet show, this is what Baha'u'lláh writes. It says, I swear by my Lord, who through a single word of his mouth hath brought into being all created things. Ever since that day, ever since he witnessing that puppet show, all the trappings of the world have seemed in the eyes of this youth akin to that same spectacle. They have never been, nor will they ever be, of any weight or consequence, be it to the extent of a grain of mustard seed. How greatly I marvel that men should pride themselves upon such vanities, whilst those possessed of insight, ere they witness any evidence of human glory, perceive with certainty the inevitability of its warning. Never have I looked upon anything save that I have seen extinction before it, and God verily is a sufficient witness. In paragraph 17, Baha'u'lláh offers one of his great admonishment to all of humanity. He writes, "It behooves everyone to traverse this brief span of life with sincerity and fairness. Should one fail to attain unto the recognition of him who is the eternal truth, let him at least conduct himself with reason and justice." You recall that Baha'u'lláh had said that the purpose of one's existence, any human beings, is to know and to worship God, to recognize his manifestation for that day. But here Baha'u'lláh says, should even one fail to attain to the recognition of the manifestation of God, at least let him conduct himself with reason and justice. Then he continues, ere long, these outward trappings, these visible treasures, these earthly vanities, these arrayed armies, these adorned vestures, these proud and overweening souls, all shall pass into the confines of the grave, as though into that box of the puppet show where all the puppets went. In the eyes of those possessed of insight, all this conflict, contention, and vainglory hath ever been and will ever be like unto the play and pastimes of children. Take heed and be not of them that see and yet deny. In paragraphs 18 and 19, the last two paragraphs that we're going to cover in this session, Baha'u'lláh states that he shares these accounts with Ali Pasha, that he may perhaps be awakened to his folly, that he may change his way and take up the path of righteousness instead of tyranny and self-aggrandizement. He writes, our call concerns not this youth and the loved ones of God, for they are already sore tried and imprisoned and expect nothing from men such as thee. Our purpose is that thou mayst lift up thy head from the couch of heedlessness, shake off the slumber of negligence, and cease to oppose unjustly the servants of God. So long as thy power and ascendancy endure, strive to alleviate the suffering of the oppressed. Shouldst thou judge with fairness and observe with the eye of discernment the conflicts and pursuits of this transient world, thou wouldst readily acknowledge that they are even as the play which we have described. In paragraph 19, Baha'u'lláh continues his stern summons to Ali Pasha. It is worth noting that all of paragraph 19, with the exception of the opening sentence, is revealed in Arabic in similar tone and style as that of other proclamatory letters of Baha'u'lláh to the kings and rulers. He writes, and this is the part that's in Persian, hearken unto the words of the one true God, and pride thyself not in the things of this world. And then he continues in Arabic, what hath become of those like unto thee who falsely claimed lordship on earth, who sought to quench the light of God in his land and to destroy the foundation of his mighty edifice in his cities. Where are they to be seen now? Be fair in thy judgment and return unto God, that perchance he might cancel the trespasses of thy vain life. Alas, we know that thou shalt never attain unto this, for such is thy cruelty that it has made hell to blaze and the spirit to lament, and hath caused the pillars of the throne to shake and the hearts of the faithful to tremble. I think we're going to end it here and pick up. We've got about 9 more paragraphs to go, which I'll cover next time. But there's a lot of material here, so I want to give some time to some of the participants who are here with us to ask any questions regarding this section. I'll invite Dr. Stockman to come and help us moderate this next section of questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Shahrokh. That was fascinating and really quite illuminating about a lot of these details, things that I knew that I had read, but I didn't know they were in this tablet until you pointed them out. I have one question while we wait to see what other questions develop. You had mentioned that Meshkin Galam got permission to leave Cyprus, basically. Is that how it worked? He had to, I suppose he was getting some sort of government pension to be exiled there. And then he got permission to be transferred to Akka. How did that happen?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, I wouldn't put it as he got some kind of a pension. Pension sounds a little bit too cushiony as far as, I mean, he was exiled with the rest. I mean, there was a certain stipend that they were given to live, but it wasn't a lot.
Sure.
And during this period, it's very interesting that he did a lot of his calligraphy in remembrance of Baha, and he did various designs with the name Hussein and various other things. Now, the 4 exiles obviously wanted to somehow get back to their Lord, and these were very avowed, followers. Sheikh Ali Sayyah was an itinerant teacher who had attained the presence of Baha'u'lláh many times. And so he obviously it was torture for him to be away from his Lord. Apparently he was poisoned about 2-3 years after. I mean, there is some evidence, I think Baghi Nakhshavani refers to it, and I think Mujan Moment in his Baha'i Religions, some contemporary Western account, also recounts that there is evidence that he may have been poisoned. Also, Agha Muhammad Baqir Qahwachi, who had been serving Baha'u'lláh, he was an elderly man who has been serving Baha'u'lláh as serving tea and coffee to visitors in the kind of the household of Baha'u'lláh in the Biruni, where the male visitors would come in and to visit Baha'u'lláh, and who had accompanied him through his exile to Istanbul and then to Edirne. He was again chosen and was exiled, and he also dies almost a year after Sayyah. So Mishkin Alam was the only survivor. The Abdul Ghaffar had basically escaped, and whereas Mishkin Alam was there. Now, when the island, when the British mandate took over the island in 1878, I believe, he petitioned to be released because he was a political prisoner, but it somehow took another 9 years for him to get to Akka. So, from what we know, he joined the Baha'u'llah's exiled family and all that in 1886, where Baha'u'lláh was at that time in Baha'i. So yes, so and then he stayed in Akkon Bahji for the remainder of his life. He passed away during Abdul Baha's Western trips. I think it was 1913 where Mashkin Alam passed away, and he was in his mid-late 80s when he passed away, which was by that time standard, was quite elderly. But yeah, he finally managed to get himself. But yeah, it was not an easy thing. So he suffered tremendously being away from his Lord. Yes.
A couple of questions we've got, actually now I think 5. Riaz asks whether the slides will be available separately from the recordings, and I suppose the answer is yes.
Well, during the video, they will see the slides. I mean, if they go through this, I mean, it's there. So yes, they will have it. I'm not going to provide the PowerPoint or the keynote, to everyone, as has always been the case. So because they get to see it, I want them to see it with the commentaries as well. Yes.
Nabil says at the end of paragraph 16, Baha'u'lláh cites the following statement, which is in quotations: "Never have I looked upon anything save that I have seen extinction before it, and God verily is a sufficient witness." Who is Baha'u'lláh quoting, or is he quoting himself?
It's interesting. I haven't found it, but I will look into it further. It could be a Islamic tradition.
It's Arabic?
Actually, it's a good question. I'll have to look it up and see. Let me see. Paragraph 16, we said? Yes, paragraph 16. Okay, let me just, I don't have it paginated in the Persian one. I'll have to look into that and see. Which one is this? I'll have to get back to the class through an email. Yeah. See which, but that's a good question. Yes.
Yeah, another question here. Do we know why the first tablet was titled Sureh and the second one Loh? What is this distinction between Sureh and Loh in the writings of Baha'u'lláh?
I think we've mentioned that a few times. Being the works of Baha'u'lláh that are revealed in Arabic are generally referred to surah in the sort of the similar Islamic tradition as the surahs or the chapters of the Quran. And I believe all of these small and large surahs are essentially part of the chapters of the great book of Revelation, the book of God, the Revelation. So I consider them, I think the best way to translate them is chapters, like Surat al-Muluk would be chapters of the kings. So Surat al-Qamis would be chapter of the garment, or, Surah Haykal would be, the chapter of the temple, so these are all the chapters. And Loh, even though the word Loh is Arabic as well, but to distinguish, one is referred to, even though there are some of the tablets that are in Arabic that are referred to Loh, like Loh al-Baha, it's in Arabic. So, but by and large, if you see a surah, a reference to a surah, Rais, it's all in Arabic. Yeah, there's no surah that's in Persian. So yeah, so that's the distinguishing feature between the two. Yes.
Well, that's intriguing. Do you know why Baha'u'lláh refers to himself as a youth? Is this a reference to the new revelation at this time, 15 years old? Of course, we're also talking about a time when Baha'u'lláh is how old at this point?
Baha'u'lláh at this
40s.
At 1868, he is 50 years old. So yes, so he's 51 years old. at the time of his exile. So but the reference to the youth is ghulam, okay? So ghulam has several meanings. It's been translated by the Guardian as the youth, but it also means slave.
Yeah.
Okay. It was referred to, there's again some features about Ghilman and Ghulam and Mamluk. Okay, like Mamluk, Baha'u'lláh refers to himself as Mamluk. Mamluk was the name of a dynasty, Islamic dynasty, but they were basically, the name Mamluk means slave, and Ghulam is also means slave. But Ghulam is also the servant or the youth that used to work, as servants in the household of someone, as a servant to a higher power. And Baha'u'lláh considered himself as the slave of God, as the servant of God, as the, Abdullah, the servant of God. And Ghulam is the expression that he uses. That and again, this expression that has been translated into English, we don't have it, but the best way the Guardian has felt would be this youth, which does have this, but this servant youth would be probably more literally correct if one would refer to it. But yes, but the expression of the youth is wherever you see the youth is ghulam. Yeah.
And back to the previous question about surah and lo, it seems to me the Guardian usually translates both of them as tablet, right?
Yes, he does. He does, because again, he wants to make sure the Westerns consider, know that it's essentially the same. These are names by which Baha'u'lláh refers to his own tablet. There are certain tablets that Baha'u'lláh actually entitles, where he says, Hada Surat al-Qamis. Okay, I keep going back to Qamis, is the garment. It's one of these amazing proclamatory tablets of Baha'u'lláh during the Adarna period, very lengthy, just unbelievably exalted, and very much Baha'u'llah's proclaiming his station. So when he says that, he is basically entitled, he's giving a title to his work. There's like, Surat al-Bayan, is another surah of the utterance. So these are titles that Baha'u'lláh has given to his work. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And then there are tablets where he says, Hada Loh al-Ruh, the tablet of the spirit, or Loh al-Roya, and so again, these are just him choosing. Now, the Guardian wanted to make sure that the friends did not confuse or differentiate between them. They're just two ways of addressing the works of Baha'u'lláh. So I think where he translates both of them as tablets, like, for example, Surah Qosn, the chapter of the branch, he translates it as the tablet of the branch. This is the one that's referred to the station of Abdul Baha. So that, the Guardian wanted to make sure to a Western ear and the Western person who's not very familiar with these expressions of Loh and Surah, that they didn't think that they were actually different from a point of view of content. They're essentially all tablets of Baha'u'lláh, all writings of Baha'u'lláh, just different style, different language of revelation. That's all it is.
Jerry makes an interesting point. He says Jonah Winters offers a reason for the writing of this tablet, owing to the death of the three Baha'is who died in the harsh conditions in the prison. And Jonah cites King of Glory, page 283, and God passes by, page 187. Do you know the names and circumstances of the deaths?
Yes, we haven't gone to. I will address that, Jerry, next time, because it's in the subsequent paragraphs. It's in the upcoming ones that we haven't, yet studied. So I will talk about that. Yes, there's actually a event surrounding that, and I will mention these individuals as well. Yes.
Good. Do we think that that's the reason this particular tablet was revealed? Because of these three deaths?
No.
No.
Why?
Okay.
Why would it? I mean, the sufferings. As I said, Baha'u'lláh just wanted to address as a grievance. I mean, and a reprimand and a chastisement and castigation, whatever you want to call it. The Ottoman, prime minister, who was the chief executor of these exiles. So that's why, and Baha'u'lláh is obviously recounting various sufferings,
mm-hmm.
and amongst those sufferings have been the death of these faithful followers, companions, but there were other things as well. I mean, believe me, those people who died, they probably were released, from the conditions, because the suffering that they had to go, even from Baha'u'lláh himself, everyone, was subjected to such very harsh and torturous and very difficult conditions. So I don't believe that was the reason, but certainly Baha'u'lláh wanted to bring that to the government's attention, that people have died as well. I mean, it's the suffering is so bad that, I mean, there was dysentery, there was it was just, they were all sick. There was only one person who did not take ill, was Abdul Baha, and he eventually got sick.
Yeah.
But initially almost everybody got sick. Okay?
Yeah.
So you can just imagine now, to add to the suffering, the sickness of us. They're now all sick. They are, they don't have water. They don't have food. They don't have proper place to lay their heads. It is absolutely, it's hot. It's a pestilential, area that they're being confined, they're being incarcerated. It's just terrible conditions. So so that's what really Baha'u'lláh is expressing, and he says, I just want to bring it to your attention. Not that we're going to, basically complain per se, but because you've already subjected us to this. But he said, we just want you to know that this is what we are going through, and that you, to appeal to your sense of justice. I think that's what he's trying to say. He says a ruler should be just and equitable to his subjects. And this is iniquitous, this is unjust. So he's appealing to his sense of justice, which obviously fell on deaf ears as well.
And which he knew would fall on deaf ears, even.
Of course.
But he even says that.
He says it's going
he
to.
Says that.
He says you're so wrapped in yourself that no matter what I say, you're not going to change your mind. Yeah. But for what it's worth, I am going to say it. It reminded me actually of what Baha'u'llah's invitation to Mirza Yahya in the Kitab al-Aqdas, where he says that God will forgive you if you repent. And he says that. He says, if you change your way, God will forgive your vain life. But he says, but you're not going to change your ways, And I think it's almost he gives them the I think it's for everyone else that God is forgiving, should we, come to our senses of when we have committed a wrong, that we he can forgive you if you however egregious your act, that you've perpetrated. But yeah, I think it's more of it's more an admonishment for the rest of humanity when you read this, not for. I think he's a lost cause from what Baha'u'lláh is basically telling. He says, you're pretty much a lost cause.
Here's a question: was this tablet delivered to the minister? And if so, was it translated into Arabic? Do we know that it would have been translated into Arabic, since he probably wouldn't know Persian?
First of all, as I said to you, that we don't have any evidence that has come to light that thus far. Not to say that there may never be one, but I haven't come across any that it was received. I believe, as a historian, that it was sent, because this tablet was definitely meant to be sent to Ali Pasha. As far as translation, the language of the Middle East at that time, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. Ali Pasha and Fuad Pasha were both knew several languages, including French and English. They were fluent in it. And so they may have known a bit of Persian, but if they needed it, they would have had translators that would have translated it. So, but Baha'u'lláh, I think the way Baha'u'lláh chooses to use Farsi to express his pain and suffering here, it adds a degree of tenderness, as far as I'm concerned, and a little bit more soul stirring than the direct and Arabic that it is. Arabic is very precise and direct, and whereas this allows a little bit more of that he's showing compassion even here, and you can see Baha'u'llah's tenderness, even in his expressions of reprimand, and also the fact that he is displeased with him, So, yeah.
Here's someone wrote, here's an interesting reference to Baha'u'lláh being a slave. Quote, "I have been most of the days of my life, even as a slave sitting under a sword hanging on a thread, knowing not whether it would fall sooner or later upon him." Shoghi Effendi cites this in Promised Day Has Come, and so in the Epistle of the Son of the Wolf.
Yes. Yeah.
And Jerry says, "Thank you both for your time and your love. Looking forward to the next time." So we have that.
Welcome,
and Riaz asks this question as well. In terms of the purpose of this tablet, Baha'u'lláh also reiterates to the Prime Minister in paragraph 26 regarding arranging a meeting with the Sultan to clarify his message and mission.
Yes, I'll address that next time as well. Yes, the invitation, Baha'u'lláh does invite in all his tablets to the kings. You see that in Loh Sultan. You see that in the in various other tablets as well. In fact, the tablet to Napoleon III as well. He invites them to basically investigate. The meeting is meant to examine and investigate, because one of the things that was very hard for Baha'u'lláh, the great injustice, was that many of these acts were done summarily. Okay, they were done without any kind of examinations or tribunals where Baha'u'lláh could actually defend himself. Okay, or I mean, there was an investigating commission in Istanbul with some of the Baha'is, with a few months before the banishment took place, but that was really had to do with the municipal police and so on. So, but there was never any kind of examination of that Baha'u'lláh was invited, actually was put before a tribunal and could defend himself. Never, ever. And and he also says the same thing to in Lohe Sultan on several occasions. That he says, gather a group of clergies or the government officials, and we're happy to attend that meeting. So, anyways, that's a constant theme, that it says that you can't accuse someone without any formal examination, especially you're going to exile them forever, give them basically a life sentence. Can you imagine? I think we need to ponder this. Can you imagine in today's date, if anyone who's accused, of any crime, to basically be bypassed the courts and just be given summarily a sentence of life imprisonment without a trial? It's just unthinkable,
wouldn't do it
in modern judicial systems. So I think this is what Baha'u'lláh is lamenting, that he is not been given the chance. So, but we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Good. All right. Well, that's all the questions, and we had really a good run of questions there, considering we don't have a huge audience. I'm impressed. Someone notes here, sovereign right without appeal. It's the right of the sovereign to make these decisions. So that's exactly, Sarah, is exactly, I think, a good description of what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, the sovereign has a right, but sovereign has made when he makes a mistake, but usually a sovereign, a just king will examine no matter what, it's there's going to be some examination, for it just can't just because he doesn't like a person or has heard some bad things about them, he shouldn't be passing judgment like that, So that's, yes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think
all right.
That's it. So, excellent. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to the final webinar in 2 weeks, when we'll finish covering the Lohe Rais and cover the Lohe Fuad as well, which is a much shorter tablet.
Yes.
So we will, of course, have this recording up and available for everybody in the course who wasn't able to attend today, and we'll have discussion about it over the next week or so. And let's remind everybody of the assignment you asked, and that's that they read over the section on the puppet show and comment about that.
Yes.
So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we will see you all again in 2 weeks.